seems like RVers are being exploited. If you look around everywhere right now, on YouTube, it's another story of a broken rig and promises that haven't been kept of people who have put their life savings, sold their houses, moving into a full-time RV situation, only to end up with a lemon, and manufacturers and dealerships that don't care and don't want to make it right. You'll even see some of the prominent RV YouTubers that are working to expose this have been slapped with legal threats, with cease and desist letters. Now, we've had our own issues with our rig. We've had a lot of things break on our brand new RV over the past year and a half that we've had it. We actually have a whole playlist of everything that's broken, as well as everything that we fixed. We happen to be pretty lucky because Justin in particular is a very handy person with a lot of house repair and car repair experience. And I am a good assistant who works well with Justin. So we have been able to fix everything up to this point that has broken on our RV, but we are not delusional or delulu, as they're saying over on the TikTok. We know it's entirely likely that there will come a time that even if we weren't ready to go off the road, that we will at least have to temporarily move into sticks and bricks while our rig gets worked on, and that the time that things can stay in the shop can be varied. You know, it helps that we went into this in 2023. We were not at the height of it. We didn't jump in probably at 2020 or 2021, the height of the fervor. We were kind of the next gen, where we had seen people who had bought the rigs at the height of the pandemic, who had seen the quality issues. We bought our 2023 rig in November of 2022, and the quality issues were well known already on the market. People had already talked about it a lot on YouTube. When our comment sections came out and anything broke in our RV, that even though we were, upbeat and trying to fix it and doing our best, we had a lot of people being, well, that's what you get for buying a pandemic rig, which, we went into it knowing that we were doing that. We also knew that Justin had the experience in the background and the desire to fix it. We also bought less than the maximum rig we could afford, budgeting in knowing that we were going to have things breaking and wanting to be able to do things like afford a hotel stay if we needed to do that. So it wasn't some kind of nasty surprise to us. We gave informed consent, as the surgeons like to say. So, that's a medical term. Informed consent is where they've got all the things and they tell you all about all the side effects and things that can go wrong with your surgery or whatever procedure you're having medically. You read it over, it's scary as heck, but you sign it. You know the risks, but you've decided that the benefits outweigh the potential risks, and you give your freely given informed consent. And we did that in this situation. So for us, there hasn't been any buyer remorse, there hasn't been any difficulties, but I know that we are not normal in that regard, because I look around and I see a lot of it on the forums, and a lot of people too who got in pre-pandemic, who are old school, have had RVs for a while, that are a little bit, I told you so, or having that Schadenfreude. So Schadenfreude is the German word for happiness at other people's upset. I think, like with anything, with the increasing boom in popularity with RVing, people who've been doing it for a while actually had kind of some resentment to the newbies, to the new class of RVers that were coming post-pandemic, because as they came in, the campgrounds got harder to book and the campgrounds raised their prices. So it was more difficult to do the lifestyle more comfortably and affordably and last minute before it became so popular. Now, the flip side of that is that RVing becoming so much more popular means there are probably benefits to that too, right? The more people coming in, but it's very easy to be like, I don't want those people here. It's kind of like when you're in a town and people come in from away and they're coming in and they're changing everything, or when you're in a town and there's a bunch of tourists and they're bringing in tourist money and things, but it's also raising things, it's changing things, it's making it different. So I think there's a lot of resentment there. So I think there is actually a crop of people that are happy that things are breaking on the post-pandemic rigs. Now, what's interesting is that some of them are aging out of their rigs. People who've had them for a while, like older rigs that, were built pre-pandemic, and now they're needing to replace and get new rigs, and they're also running into issues. So I think that's actually part of why we're seeing more talk about this. That and the fact that supply chain stuff should have potentially gotten better by now. It lags a couple of years, but it's like, okay guys, is this supply chain or is this greed? What is happening with the manufacturers? So it's a perfect storm. I do think it's starting to hit everybody, and I think that is kind of the case when it's just the newbies. Oh, these these silly guys, these people who are outsiders who are coming in and trying to infiltrate RV life. Ha ha, serves them right. And as somebody I think that was looked at that way, and I've had people certainly kind of like on Simpsons, like point and laugh at me and mock me when I knew what I was getting into. You can actually accept risks in an informed way, even if they're negative. I think I have seen this. So there's this certain point where it's like, okay, well, how much of this is actually understandable and how much of this is greed or laziness or RV manufacturers knowing they have a captive audience? And that can be really tough to pull apart, and I think a lot of that depends on how they respond to things. There's been some pressure campaigns from some prominent YouTubers that have yielded some results. You've seen some more manufacturers doing more. I've also noted that in some of the cease and desist literature that's been shared in those channels, that manufacturers are also really scared to respond to the demands from the videos that are being made with the rationale, well, if I have to help this person, then I'm going to help everybody. And then the people who are exposing it are like, yeah, dang right, you got to help everybody. But it's just a fascinating thing. And it's a question of, are RV manufacturers specifically exploiting their customers, or are they just, another way that capitalism manifests, where it's all about profit above everything else, and the more profit you can squeeze out, the better company you are, and screw the moral implications. There's kind of this belief, within the free market system that if customers are bearing whatever indignities, then so be it. I don't know. It's an interesting argument. There's all kinds of arguments to be made here, right? And I think that people have a different perspective depending on whether they're the one being screwed over or not. But yeah, so you have this thing where people spend a lot of money on an RV. So you have the fallacy of sunk costs, which is basically when you put some money into something, psychologically, it becomes easier to put more and more and more money into something. And RV manufacturers know that. They know that you've put that money down, that you're willing to write it out and throw, as I say, good money after bad, which is unfortunate. There's the captive audience now, especially as full-time RVing has become more popular. These are people's homes. It's not some fun thing that they're just kind of using on the weekend. There's more of a pressure on them to produce results, but there's also fewer options for the people who are living in the RVs. And then there's also the power of fantasy, which I think is really, the secret sauce in all this, and is not just pertaining to RV life, right? So a lot of people dream about hitting the road. That was one thing that we didn't really have. We actually are weird in the full-time RV space because we didn't have any dreams of living full-time in an RV before we did it. We actually were kind of in a place where we both had remote jobs. We were in a very expensive big city apartment in a very expensive area, but neither of us needed to be there for any reason. We didn't have family in the area. We had a few friends, but we had made them when we had lived there for a few years. We'd actually relocated to that area in Dallas for Justin, my husband's work, and then he got a remote gig instead. We actually, at the time we're renting, we had sold our house to move down there, so we didn't have a commitment there. And we realized we could live anywhere and that we didn't really know where exactly we wanted to live. So part of our fun was like, well, we'll go on this big trip, we'll see a whole bunch of places, and we'll figure out where we ultimately want to settle down. And we won't do it based on vibes or hearsay or any of that. We will literally go all around the country. We've been through all the major regions of the contiguous US. We didn't go to Alaska or Hawaii. We have been to Alaska. Haven't been to Hawaii yet. We'll get there eventually, although that's very expensive to live there, and that's a whole other can of worms, but that was never really on our list of places. But yeah, we traveled all around and we found the place we like better than any other. We actually found a few places. We found places like, well, you know what, if we end up having a vacation home or a summer home and a winter home, we'd like to go here. And it wasn't necessarily what we expected going in, and we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't gone around all the places. So for us, that was worth it. Relocation is really expensive. Having flexible housing, while you land shop or house hunt, so that we don't have to really worry about exactly when we close or selling one place to buy another and the timing of the two trains passing in the night. It's awesome. Relocation can be really expensive. We also have the peace of mind of knowing that we've seen everywhere we really want to see and that we really, really like where we're going to settle down. So that's for us. We had no dream, but a lot of people, like my mother, this was her dream. My dad unfortunately passed away before they could do that, but it was my mother's dream. I've talked to a whole bunch of other people that's their dream, or alternatively, I've talked to people who are like, well, my apartment's so expensive. I'm tired of paying a landlord. I'm tired of that. this is much better, I want to be free, open road, and then they get out there and the RVs break in, it costs them to fix, the gas is expensive, they find that they can't boondock as easily as they want to, like Walmart's kicking them out, the RV parks are booked or expensive, and especially if they're not used to being right next to people, RV parks are pretty dense. I mean, for us it was no big deal. We lived in an apartment, we had attached walls. I mean, for goodness sake, we see people all the time. But if you have a dream that it's going to do X, Y, Z, or if it's going to be perfect all the time and be the retirement drip that's idyllic and nothing bad's going to happen, or if you think, I'm going to save all this money on housing and it's going to be really a lot easier, then I think that the reality of it can really butt up against it. I think the power of fantasy can compel people to come into this where it really doesn't make sense for them financially, logistically, temperamentally, or otherwise. And I think it's very easy for manufacturers to exploit that, to be honest. And then once they have you in, the captive audience, you got the sunk costs, then you're stuck. Now, RV life isn't the only thing like this that can feel like both a dream and a scam simultaneously, right? Like where you can feel trapped and have those unrealized expectations. I'm thinking specifically of people who get into developments with HOAs and then find out their HOA is really expensive and causing lots of problems. And yeah, it's a good school district for the kids, but they hate it. It's just as onerous and burdensome as renting an apartment, except now they've got all the responsibility of being a homeowner plus all the lack of freedom as a renter. That can be really tricky with homeowners associations. I've also seen this with student loans where people will go and they'll be told, oh, no, don't worry about it. Education is the path. It doesn't even matter what you go into. It's about the connections, things like that. They'll go in, they'll take lots of loans, and then they won't be able to get a job and they'll have crazy loans. And even once they get a job, they'll basically be in indentured servitude for years and years for insurance, for all these crazy loans that they scooped up along the way. And at that point, you're underwater. And then it's like, okay, it's that power of fantasy, this idea that you want a better life, you want to better your circumstances, and there are always people there to get all the money they can out of you. And unfortunately, RV life is no different. It falls prey to these same forces of captive audience, sunk costs, and the power of fantasy. So what do we do about it? Well, there's some people out there doing some really good advocacy, and as a community we've been doing good advocacy in general. It's going well. I think it'll take some time. I think a big part of it is that people who were pre-pandemic RV lifers really had to get on board and realize that it's not just something that's going to affect the outgroup, the other, the new kids on the block, that it affects all of us. And I think that's starting to happen and that it will continue to happen. And I think that there'll be a certain point where it will be much harder to squeeze us as a group. It's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.